All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are located. But thank you all for being here today. My name is Rachel Cole. I am the committee chair for the GWIS programming committee. That means we host events mostly virtual because we like to try to connect all of our members who are spread out internationally. So mostly in the US, but international as well. So thank you for being here. This is our annual webinar on the GWIS Fellowships program. We are going to talk about details of the program, introduce some of the past winners that we have joining us here today, and provide advice and try to answer questions. So let me do two quick introductions to Graduate Women in Science, and then I will introduce all of our speakers. But Graduate Women in Science is a national nonprofit organization that works to empower women in science and recognize women in science. It has been around since 1921, so over 100 years, and especially and relevant for us today, GWIS has a long-standing tradition of providing fellowships. We have endowed money that provides really a good number, typically around 10 fellowships per year. It varies a little bit, but this is one of our best programs, and I think, introduces GWIS to a lot of people as well. So I wanted to also mention that the programming committee, that's the committee that I chair currently, we work to provide opportunities for all of our members to engage in conversations about professional development topics, or to do things like film screenings, which we just hosted our first one, hoping to make it an annual tradition. We hosted that last week, and really to provide benefits for our GWIS members. So I have posted a link for everyone here about how to access past conversations. Almost all of the webinars that we have hosted, we have recorded, and you have access to them. If you are watching later and don't get this link, these can be found on the GWIS website, which is www.gwis.org. And there's a section called Members Only Documents. And you have to log in because you're special. So you have to log in order to get access to that. And yeah, then you can access it just a ton. And it can also help you find people who could maybe mentor in particular topics. And then lastly, I just wanted to share this infographic that we just created. If you are already a member, fantastic. You could actually, I could send this to you. I can send it out after. And this could be a way for you to help recruit other people in your same area, to tell them about some of the benefits of membership in Graduate Women in Science. And if you are not a member, I will just encourage you to become a member. It's a really great organization, and I think helps us to connect when it can be hard to connect. You might have a local chapter in your location. We have over 30 local chapters, but you also might not have a local chapter. So that is why we do also try to provide a lot of virtual opportunities. Okay, let me pull up my agenda. So I'm going to introduce our speakers today, and then I have a set of questions. We're talking to two different kind of groups of people. We have the committee chair of the fellowships committee here, and this is Dr. Zoe Hansen. Zoe, thanks for being here today.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I hope my internet's not pooping out. But thank you for organizing this, Rachel. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. We'll have lots of questions for you. I wanted to say briefly that the role of Zoe and co-coordinators for the fellowships committee, they oversee the fellowships committee, and they serve as, and this is big, source of answers for all questions related to the fellowship. No pressure. And this is an appointed position, and this position can be any active GWIS member. So if you have any interest in a leadership opportunity in the future, this is a great one because you get to help give out money, which is very fun. And then there is oh, Aubrey is here. Fantastic. I'll go ahead and pin her if she's able to talk. It's okay if not. But Aubrey Jeffries is the program officer for the fellowships committee, and she provides administrative support to the fellowship coordinators. She's the source of information relating to past and present fellowship selection, the process, and the procedure. She has previously served as the fellowship coordinator. She assists in maintaining the National Fellowship Program that is outlined in our Graduate Women in Science Policies and Procedures document. She is an appointed position and serves on the fellowship committee. So these are our sources of answers for all the questions that we have. So we'll be hearing first from Zoe. I'm going to quickly introduce our featured previous winners. And then I'll also, after we kind of get an introduction to the fellowship from Zoe and possibly Aubrey, then I will ask a few questions of the fellowship winners. So we have Dr. Garaga. Would you like to say just a little bit about where you are and when you received your fellowship?
Yeah, hi everyone. And yes, it's night 10:38 in India now. And glad to meet you all from different parts of the world. And yes, I'm Dr. Rajlakshmi Garaga, and I hope I'm audible and visible to you all.
We can hear you. Your video did go away, but we can hear you.
Okay, fine. So yeah, I'm Dr. Rajalakshmi Garaga. I'm joining from India, currently where I'm serving as an assistant professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Jodhpur. And my research focuses on environmental challenges affecting public health with a particular emphasis on air and water pollution in rural and under-resourced areas. Currently, I'm also a principal investigator at IIT Jodhpur for Unnat Bharat Abhiyan initiative, which is working towards sustainable development in rural India. And yes, it's really an honor to join this panel today and share my journey as a GWIS fellow.
Thank you so much for being here, especially at night and all the way from India.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Okay, and I'll introduce Dr. Muge Alberek.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And actually, the GWIS fellowship changed my life because when I received the fellowship, I was an assistant professor in Turkey. And after the fellowship, I actually invited in the United States, and I started to work at Oregon State University. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And we're excited for you. And I'll introduce Tasha Jawa.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you. I'm Tasha. I'm a fifth-year MD PhD candidate at Queen's University, which is in Kingston in Canada. You haven't been to Canada or you don't know where Kingston is, it's kind of halfway between Toronto and Montreal, which might be easier landmarks from people not from Canada to recognize. But yeah, so I'm in a combined program, which means I flip-flop back and forth between medical school and my PhD. So right now I'm in my third year of PhD overall after having completed two MD years. And I'm really grateful to get to be here today to chat with all of you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And Emily, we've also are lucky to have you from the field.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Emily Sprue. I actually got the GWIS fellowship this last year, and that's funding my field research that I'm doing now. So I'm in Chile, specifically in Laguna San Rafael, studying leopard seals and their reproductive patterns. And I've been here for almost 2 months, but it's been amazing. We've gotten so much data. It's been an amazing season, and we've seen leopard seal pups, which were the first ones ever to see them and get samples from their mothers. And it's this huge, big collaborative project that we're working on. But originally, I'm a PhD student from Texas at Baylor University. I'm in my last year right now, finishing up, and I have a postdoc already lined up at the University of Rhode Island, which I will be going starting in next fall. Yeah, fall of 2025. Yes. So finishing up one last year. And yeah, really excited to be here. I'm very honored to be here.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll hopefully hear a little bit more from each of you, kind of about how you found out about the fellowship program and any advice you have about that. I do want to turn this over to Zoe and Aubrey. You guys can decide who introduces what aspects, but would you first give a little introduction to yourself and then introduce the program? And the two main questions that I have for you are, what's the deadline for this cycle? And any information you have about kind of the overall timeline of the process.
Zoe, do you want to go and I can fill in?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Well, we can introduce ourselves and then we'll kind of tag team. But yeah, my name is Zoe Hansen. I'm currently a visiting assistant professor at Carleton College in Minnesota. But prior to that, did my graduate work at Michigan State University and a postdoc at University of Minnesota. My background is in microbiology and microbial ecology. And I first became involved with GWIS as a graduate student at Michigan State. And so I grew in my sort of GWIS trajectory, working more at the local chapter level, and then got involved nationally, actually in the position I'm currently in as a co-coordinator or co-chair for the National Fellowships Program through GWIS National. And that's where I first met Aubrey, who's been an awesome mentor and leader in this space. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, so like Zoe said, I've been doing this program for I think like 5 or 6 years now. I think I've been helping. I also got started in this as a graduate student. So I did my graduate work at the University of Notre Dame, where one of my mentors there was the tech chair of GWIS at the time, and then also was well, I guess she became tech chair kind of later. But yeah, she was tech chair. She also ran the fellowships program. So that's kind of how myself and a couple of other grad students at the university got involved with GWIS initially. And I've been a part of that ever since for, again, 5 or 6 years. And I've overseen this process for about 4 or 5 of those 6 years, probably. So I'm again have transitioned a little bit, hopefully, into this program officer role to allow some other folks to step into the leadership position, but doing my best to support them in running this program because it takes a lot of work. In answering questions, kind of like Rachel had hinted at with our positions as well. So a lot of the responses from the general email for the fellowships program and stuff are coming from typically myself, but sometimes consultations with the other fellowship chairs too, if we have some complicated questions that come through. So do you want to chime in for answers, Zoe, or and then I can fill
Yeah,
in
we can, I
blanks.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the first thing I'll do is just post a link in the chat to our kind of homepage for the fellowship program. Whoops, I'm changing the URL as we speak. We don't want to do that. So should have done this ahead of time. But so this is kind of our landing page for, oh, I think it's broken, but you have to remove the spaces between the P and the R. Let's try that again, everyone. Okay. Yay. Okay. Anyway, okay, so just a basic overview. The GWIS Fellowship Program is designed to award women scientists or women identifying scientists for research projects that they've submitted to be crucially reviewed by experts in the field. And so this can be in a number of different disciplines and is funded by our endowments at the national level every year. So annually, we're giving out awards to fellows who are performing critical research in many different areas of STEM. To get at Rachel's question, so the first question, the big question, when is the deadline? So our deadline for this cycle is January 13th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is all over our website. It's on the main landing page that I successfully now linked in the chat. But there are a couple of other sort of nested pages that we'll talk through as well, where that will be kind of at the top of your priority list. So if you're applying this year, put that on your calendar now, January 13th, 2025. The deadline is 5 p.m. Eastern time sharp.
Yeah, the application portal closes at that time and will not accept anything. So it's set by the actual site itself and it will close. So yeah.
And then Aubrey, I don't know, do you want to jump in, or we can talk about the different components of the application? I don't know what would be most useful or if we should make this more organic, but
Yeah, I mean, we can chime in, and then Zoe, if you have the site up, do you want to link the next link, which should be the application and checklist, because that's probably the next um thing that's most important to just maybe high level overview as well. Perfect. Thank you for doing that.
Mhm.
So this is, I believe, the first drop down. If you go to, the fellowships and you hover over that from the landing page that Zoe shared in that first link. But basically the application checklist is going to overview everything that is required, a required component of submitting the application again by that January 13th deadline. So there are instructions here about how to fill out the application form itself, which includes 4 short answer responses. One of those 4 is just your abstract, which is a 200-word limit abstract, and the other ones, I believe, have 400-word limits for the other 3 short response essays. Outside of that, the 2 main pieces of documentation that everyone will submit are the project description as well as the budget and justification component. All of the requirements and formatting requirements are written specifically for those 2 components. Those are the 2 main components. And I guess, Zoe, if you disagree with me, you can say otherwise, but usually people not meeting format requirements on either of these 2 pieces of documentation are the first ways people get disqualified. So review what the requirements are for page length, like font size, etc. for those, because that's the quickest way, I think, that we typically disqualify applicants, aside from missing application components, like only having 1 out of 2 required letters of recommendation. Those letters of recommendation from your letter writers are also due by that deadline, and you can send daily reminders from the system, like once every 24 hours from the portal to your letter writers. And also like remind them in person or whatever, if it's an advisor, whoever you're seeing, but we cannot accept late letters of recommendation either. We have people email us every single year saying, we're so sorry we didn't get it in, but for the sake of fairness for everybody, everyone has the same amount of time to contact their letter writers and ask them to submit by the deadline. We just can't accept late letters. So I'd say those are the 2 main ways: is a missing application component like a letter of rec, or not meeting the formatting requirements for the application with the budget justification or the project description, are like the main ways that people typically get disqualified, unfortunately, and we don't want to have to do that every year. So if you have questions, again, you can email us at our main inbox. And I'll put that in the chat so that it's easy access for folks as well to save if they happen to need it. But most of the questions you should be able to get an answer to from the site, especially the application checklist page with specific application component questions. Do you have anything else to add on that, Zoe? I feel like that's kind of high level, most of the information.
I
For
think that
some
covers
folks,
it.
they may have to submit a human subject or animal subject form as well for supplemental documentation. Those approvals and permits, we understand that sometimes folks don't have them. And so if your application, if your work would require one, we totally understand if you don't have it at the time of proposal submission. But if your project is selected as a winner, essentially we would need that permit, that approval permit, by the time you're wanting funds essentially distributed to you if you are again selected as a fellowship winner, so that we've ensured that you've collected the correct permits and those are in place before we send the funds and distribute those to your grant administrator at your institution. So those can be done later. Some people do already have them and they can attach them. So I just wanted to say that out loud as well, because those are some questions. That's a common question we get in that fellowship inbox as well around those. So I'll say that, but anything else you want to add on that before we maybe go into like high level timeline overview?
I think those are the big pieces. Are there any immediate questions about
Yeah, that's what I was
application
gonna say.
components? Yeah.
You can put them in the chat if you don't want to say them out loud, but
Hi, I have
yeah.
a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, hi, I'm Cho. I'm a current PhD student at Mount Sinai in New York, and I've not been a member of GWIS, so happy to join later and very happy that you guys organized this session today. So first, I have questions about what are the criteria that you guys often access the application, especially for the abstract and the project description, like how deep level should we go in to give you insight on our project?
That's a good question. Sorry, Aubrey, I don't know if you
No, go for it. Go for
Okay.
it.
And feel free to add or
Yeah.
correct anything that I say. But yes, so essentially when your application is submitted, and we'll talk about the timeline a bit, but your application will be assessed and reviewed by expert reviewers in a field related to the discipline that you are, writing about. And so our reviewers are often looking for, rigorous methodology, hypotheses that you've generated and are planning to test, how you will execute those experiments and try to gather, the information and assess the results from your experiment. And so really emphasizing, it's a hypothesis-driven research question that a reviewer will be assessing as they would, a grant application or a grant fellowship application. And so writing an abstract and a project description to reflect the research that you want funded is really important.
Yeah, I think the second component of that too is part of our evaluation and why we ask certain questions for the short essays is to also understand, what you're hoping to achieve through career development, and additionally what your like collaboration mentoring capacity is in the STEM space, especially for women or girls at a younger age who are coming up in a STEM space and have shown interest in that space. So identifying extracurriculars or events and things that you've participated in or are and maybe in the process of participating in throughout the year as well is something that's strongly taken into consideration as this organization is basically it's built on a foundation of us supporting each other in the STEM space in wanting to create a safe and prolific environment for all of these women in STEM. So that's one of the other major components aside from what Zoe said, where your application is going to be reviewed by experts in your field. So writing at a technical level is completely fine and is encouraged for this type of application, since we are recruiting reviewers who are well suited to review like a peer-reviewed article in that same space that you would be, submitting a paper in your field. So hopefully that helps give you a little bit of background on how our applications are evaluated each cycle.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very clear. Thank you.
Awesome. Good question. Okay, anything else about application components or anything like that before we kind of high level overview what our typical kind of cycle looks like once we've reached the application deadline in January?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
I'm Sujata. I'm a graduate student at SIU School of Medicine. I had a question about the collaborative and mentoring capacity application section. So under that, it also talks about personal experience and service. Like for the personal experience, since there will not be any documents or anything to have evidence about it, like how do you go about analyzing that aspect under the mentoring capacity?
So
Um,
I
oh,
think that's
sorry.
just high level, like kind of explaining like the how you've done that yourself. So have you, you know, are you a tutor for, high school students and you are largely helping school students with math? So like algebra, calc, physics, chemistry, like whatever. Like I did that all through college as well. So are there things that you're doing in that space that's helping students in STEM who are going to college or they're in, undergrad, and as a grad student, you're in addition to TAing, holding extra like study hours, office hours, things like that, that are again kind of helping students in the STEM space explore that space, be more successful in the STEM space. Um, I am. Do you have any other examples, Zoe, that you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this can look really different depending on,
Yeah.
how you shaped your own experience in STEM. Collaboration and mentoring, oops, my lights turned off, could be related to, collaborations you've nurtured with other researchers in your space, with your lab. And as Aubrey was saying, it might take on a more mentorship or educational role, teaching role. So really reflecting on how you've, expanded your experience in STEM beyond, perhaps the lab bench or the computer, to having a broader reach in your community. So thinking about the impacts you've had on kind of a STEM community. Um, and that these are components that our reviewers will also see. And so it's, yeah, just kind of, as Aubrey was saying, kind of, it's a way to demonstrate the versatility or the breadth of your experience in STEM beyond just the research component itself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It helps. Yeah.
Hasana, do you have a question?
Yes, hello. My name is Hassana. I'm a PhD student at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Thank you very much for holding this meeting. It's been very helpful so far. But my question isn't actually to do with the applications, it's to do with the membership. I applied for the membership and I've paid the dues, but I haven't received an email that's saying that it's been processed since I received the invoice email. So I'm not really sure. And I tried to log into the membership only aspect and I couldn't. Like I didn't have a profile, so I don't really know what's going on there.
Okay. I don't think anyone from our membership committee is on, but I don't know, Rachel, if you have any insight on that.
Aubrey just posted the
General email.
address. Yes, general email address for we do have a memberships committee and a committee chair that should be able to help you and will hopefully respond very quickly. So
Okay.
send an email to memberships@gwis.org. Our president is also on here, which I'm very excited about. Nafisa's here. So Nafisa, if you have anything that you would like to add to this, please do.
Yeah, I think emailing the membership email Hasanat would be a great idea. And I'll also make sure to follow up on our side with our technology chair and all that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Manor? Let's see. Manor, if you'd like to ask a question, go right ahead.
Hello? Now we can hear you. Not now.
Or did she hop off?
Hi, can you hear?
Yes.
Now, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm assuming you can hear me, but now I can't hear you. Um, see. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm
Yes.
just gonna ask my question. Okay. So my question is about the budget. I see from the previous awardees that the maximum budget that they have gotten is around 7,009, and also lower than that. But the maximum that is allowed by this grant is 10 grand. So should the candidates ask for the maximum, or like the previous awardees, they should be more take into account that maybe we should, request lesser amount than 10,000?
I think this will really depend on your needs for the research that you're proposing. We ask that you do, when you're submitting your budget, have an itemized breakdown of, what those budget points are. And so depending on the equipment that you're needing to use to complete your research, or any materials or supplies that you're hoping to order, whether you're hoping to use your part of your fellowship to pay for some undergraduate assistance, really having an itemized breakdown of those things is important, so that we can see, what's the justification for the budget that you are requesting. And if it is the full 10,000, you can request the full 10,000. There's no guarantee that you would be awarded that, even if you are awarded the fellowship. And so the amounts that have been awarded in the past are often calibrated to the need of the awardee. And not everyone asks for the full amount in their application.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Maybe we can hear really quick, just since we're talking about the
Yes.
budget, maybe we can hear from each of the previous winners about if they remember how much they requested and how much they were awarded, if they don't mind sharing. Muge, would you like to begin?
Thank you. Actually, I asked for 10K budget. I received 7K budget, $7,500. That was enough for my the field work, because I actually asked for only field work, and I did astronomical observations, like we observed stars during nights, and that is really hard to do, like as a field work. And we have like the 5 different institutions, and they all have their own budget. I just used my budget for the field work, and we did observations along Mississippi River from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Therefore, the budget was really enough for my field work.
That's great to know. Tasha, you're next on my screen if you want to share.
Sure. So my research is kind of at the intersection of multiple fields. What I asked for funding for was to pay for cerebral oximetry sensors that I can put on my patient's forehead to monitor the level of oxygen getting into their underlying brain tissue. I requested $9,720 and I received $9,750, so it was perfect.
Good. Dr. Garaga?
Yeah, I have asked for, I think, $10,000, but then I received $6,250. Of course, I've sought the rest of the amount from other funding agency, I mean, from the institute itself, but I think this is more than enough, whatever they have provided for my work. I'm satisfied.
Great, thank you. Emily?
Yeah, so my budget was focused on me going into the field for a whole 2 months, but specifically me and one other person to join me on this team, specifically somebody from Chile, so a local person where I was doing field work, understanding that I'm from the United States, coming into this country to collect samples, and wanted to incorporate as many people that are from this community as I could. So it's for me and one other person, and in total, I asked for 9,750, and I got $8,000. So it was enough to fund both of us to come out here as well. I think I ended up just cutting the days a little bit to save a little bit on the end of that. One other thing I was going to mention, I don't know if you guys want whenever people ask questions, if you guys want any people who have gotten the fellowship to give any feedback or anything. But like one thing I was going to talk about is giving an example for what I talked about for my section of the application for mentorship and building collaboration. So specifically, I work with a lot of international collaborators. And so going to different countries and collecting samples for leopard seals, my study system. And so it's a huge collaboration. But on top of that, I also am a McNair Scholar Graduate Assistant. So McNair is a TRIO program that serves underrepresented students to get into a PhD program or higher education. And so I've worked with TRIO programs like Upward Bound and McNair for about 10 years now, serving that community. And so that's one of my ways of being a mentor to those students. I've mentored now probably 150 students, helping them get into graduate school who are all underrepresented, first gen, low income. So that was kind of my way of filling out that part of the application and addressing that area.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you for that. Yes, and if any of our previous winners, if you have comments, especially on something that Zoe or Aubrey is saying or a question someone has, feel free to write in the chat too. That I think it is really helpful for everyone to hear your experiences. So thanks. I think that was helpful. Great question about the budget. Anywhere specific you want to go from here, Zoe and Aubrey?
Probably timeline, kind of what it looks like once we hit January.
Yeah.
Do you want me to kind of run through it and then okay. So like we've said and reiterated, and it's on the site, it's on the application portal. You'll see the countdown in there. The deadline is January 13th. So essentially after we receive all of those applications that, have been submitted by the deadline, what we will do is usually spend a week or two right after that. And we kind of hinted at this, but maybe didn't say it in this specific terms. We have to do a compliance check for all applications that have been submitted, again, to make sure that all formatting requirements, the letters of recommendation, all of those application components are visible in each of those applications that have been submitted. So we do compliance checks and have to figure out, unfortunately, those who have been disqualified and the total number of applications that we're moving forward to what we call our committee members stage. From there, we usually have probably 20 to 30 or so committee members on an average basis who serve on our committee, and then they're the ones who actually help us facilitate the solicitation of expert reviewers like we just mentioned. So typically between February and May, we're working very closely with our committee members to find, again, expert reviewers to actually complete the evaluations by our review deadline is May 15th. Sometimes we have extraneous circumstances where we have to extend that just a little bit, but we try our best to have all evaluations in for all applications by mid-May. And from there, we have to look at all of the evaluations that have been completed and see how all of our totaling kind of works out and see where we land. From there, we put forward as the fellowship committee, but really it's just the three of us as the co-chairs and the program officer. From there, we essentially are able to identify who our recommended fellowship winners are. And then in the last 2 to 3 years, I think, we've also started identifying honorable mentions who also submitted really great applications and work. And unfortunately, we just, don't always have, the funding to be able to fund everybody. Like that would be fantastic if we could do that. But we started identifying honorable mentions as well. So that's another, CV worthy item that, applicants are able to put on their resume. And so those are typically done within a couple of weeks of mid-May. And then those actually have to be presented and voted on at the national chapter meeting. So we have to have those completed by then, and they have to be voted on and approved by the actual entire Graduate Women in Science National Committee. So that takes place usually sometime in June. And then we are able to identify or contact, I guess I should say at that point, contact those who have been selected as fellowship awardees And then we have to get actual written acceptance from those folks before we can then, essentially communicate with everyone else the results of that year's application cycle. And then fund distributions, again, for those who've been selected and have accepted their award, typically happens the earliest, I'd say, is like end of June, and that's probably being pretty optimistic. But it's usually like July. But a lot of that is very dependent upon the applicant's response rate, the grant administrator, whoever that is within your institution, who's helping with the fund agreement that has to be signed by like an advisor, the grant administrator, whoever. And then our team as well. And so I will also say out loud to this group, since you are all here, this is a completely volunteer run organization. So we do our best to streamline this and make the process move as quickly as possible. There are hangups sometimes from either end of the institution versus our organization. So sometimes there's just lag in response time. And some funds have just not been distributed until like September or October because there have been hangups getting the fund agreement completed by all parties, and we can't distribute funds until that is completed. From there, again, basically that fund distribution period is the July 1st through the following June 30th time mark. And at that point, if you still have funds left and you received your funds late, again, because of whatever circumstances, those individuals are able to request an extension. And those would come to, again, Zoe as a co-chair, our other co-chair, Susan, and myself. We'll make sure that it's a reasonable request and send approval. Otherwise, remaining funds have to be sent back to the Graduate Women in Science organization. I'm pretty positive we pretty much have always approved those. And I think that probably covers a lot of the timeline. Do you think I missed anything major in there?
The progress report, the final report.
Yeah.
Or
So yeah, final reports are due again for this is specifically for application winners. Those would be they're required to be submitted, and this information is provided to all these individuals, but it's the past president at GWIS.org email address. And those are submitted by, again, that June 30th deadline. So essentially by the end of that funding period, letting us know how you utilize the funds. Did you submit a paper and put, GWIS as one of your, sponsors on that list? And other things that are noteworthy to the progress that you made on your research work, field work, whatever that might look like, with the funds that we basically distributed to you for that. So that's usually due June 30th. Again, there are exceptions to that. If someone requests an extension, then it's due at that like 6-month extension mark. So it'd be like December, end of December of that year instead of end of June that year. But same process applies of sending it to the past president at gwis.org, and the format's the exact same. So nothing changes. The timeline or deadline for that just changes a little bit. If that extra time to utilize the funds is needed by an awardee. So Minora, feel free to go ahead and ask your question.
Can you hear me? Okay, that's great. So I just had a question about so if, for example, an applicant has already gotten some grant from another source, let's say that's around 75 grand, would the GWIS fellowship take into account it as a sign that the grant or the project is worthy for funding, or will that be a negative impact on the application since the student already has enough funds, one would assume?
Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely taken into consideration. If a project is already fully funded, I'm going to be honest, you're not probably reaching the top of the priority list to receive funding. Especially if some of the items you're listing in your budget and justification are already being funded by another grant. So definitely like be cautious of that if that's a situation that you're personally dealing with. So things that are in your, again, kind of line item list, expenses that are showing up in your budget should really be things that you need funding for and are not already being funded by another grant, fellowship, whatever type of award you may be looking at. But if you're like a fully funded applicant, I would say that it's more than likely that your application is maybe not going to be selected to receive funding because that funding is going to go to someone who needs it for field work, for research materials, undergraduate support, whatever that may look like for them. But you may be considered as an honorable mention should your application be scored, in the top tier of applications that are received that year. I hope that helps a little bit. But the funding is, targeted to go towards applicants who are in need of funding, not those who are already fully funded.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
For funding, is it based like on reimbursement, receipts? How is the funding process?
So funds are distributed and we are not able to do you can't save receipts and get reimbursed with that. So everything would need to be utilized after receiving the funds. So you can't go splurge and spend all that money you're hoping to get ahead of time and then be awarded and essentially just like bank that $5,000 or whatever it may be after the fact. Yeah, it needs to be utilized after the funds have been distributed to that institution for your utilization, unfortunately. Yeah.
Also another question for equipment, is funding available for like renting equipment or like do we need to have the actual equipment or how does that work?
No, it can absolutely be used for renting or utilizing equipment that's maybe in another laboratory across campus, or if you have to travel, we, have folks who have to travel to other national lab locations or internationally to places to utilize equipment. So it can, cover some of the traveling that's maybe taking place there, then also, the cost of actually utilizing that equipment in a different, essentially, research space as well. So that's totally acceptable and can be a line item in your budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a question in the chat from Daniela. Is there a limit regarding career level, years after PhD or something like that? Or is it, in general, is it less likely to get a fellowship if you are no longer really an early stage researcher?
I'd say yes. It's really focused on graduate students, postdoc, and early career faculty members. So those first couple years of a faculty member, starting up a lab from square one, needing to, purchase all new equipment, general lab supplies and things like that to get their lab up and running. This is not a fellowship for tenure faculty or anybody who is probably above, honestly, like an associate professor level. And even that, pending how many years you're in an associate professor level, that may or may not be the best fit for kind of the eligibility of this fellowship. So hopefully that helps, Daniela. That's a great question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other topics you want to hit? Or should I ask a question from our list?
That's
Okay.
good.
I think one question that comes up a lot is given the space limits of this application, people often want to know like how detailed should the proposal be in terms of different things. And so someone has asked specifically with methods, do you have any advice on how detailed the method should be given the space limitations of the fellowship application?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question to ask and answer. I think it's a great question to ask. It's tough to answer because that's really dependent on each applicant's project description. Um, if you're developing new methodology within your research instead of using, um, already peer-reviewed methodology from another paper and you're utilizing that, but you're looking for a different outcome, those can be presented a little bit differently. If you're presenting new methodology, then yeah, I would say experts in your field are probably going to want more detail as to how you came up and are proposing this new methodology different from what's being conducted by other researchers in that field. I think honestly go with your gut and do what you think is best to present your research work in the best way possible. Have other folks in your lab, your advisors, other collaborators that you work with review your application and make sure it's cohesive, especially around methodologies. I think that's the best way to ensure that your work is being presented in a clear manner and that, again, someone who's an expert in that field could read it and be like, I'm on board and I totally understand the process that's being presented by this applicant, and they agree that it's feasible, right? To do the work in such a way that's being presented in that work. I think that's probably the best way to answer that question is, use your resources, your advisors and mentors, to make sure that your application is feasible and it makes sense, because they're the ones who are going to be able to obviously give you that advice more easily than anyone else because they can relate to the work that you are doing on a regular basis. Hopefully that helps a little bit with that. It's a tough question to answer because it's definitely unique for everybody's research needs.
Yeah, I think that was helpful. Any of our previous winners, do you have any advice on the method section or any comments about what your strategy was? Yeah,
I
Yeah,
can
Tasha, go
give
ahead.
a little bit. Generally, my advice would be when I'm writing any grant application, I'll write the method section similar to how I would write it if I was submitting like a manuscript in my field.
Yeah.
So a level of detail that anyone else who's also in that field would be able to understand it and be able to reproduce it. But not so much that you'd be including things that you would normally put in like the supplemental materials and like super extensive details and things like that. I will also echo, and this is kind of one of my tips for just doing an application overall, is to have as many people as possible, both within and outside of your field. So, like, review your application. I think earlier on in my academic career, I was always kind of the person who wanted to be like, oh, I could do everything by myself. I don't need to ask for help. I've learned that that's like a really not effective way of being in academia and reaching out and asking for help. And even if people tear your application to shreds, rewriting things is probably one of the best things that you can do for your own application. And you'll look at your previous versions and you'll look at your final version and be much more proud of the work that you've produced. So I think not just for methods, but for everything, I would echo what Aubrey was saying about getting people both within and outside of your field to review things.
Thanks, Tasha. That's really great advice.
Mhm.
One thing that I did for the methods that I think I've done the same thing with all applications that I apply for and for grants is I specifically will always have a set of objectives and then I have a set of hypotheses for those objectives. And then through my methods, I always come back to those objectives and say, I will answer this objective with this method. I'll answer this one with this one and address this hypothesis with this one. And then knowing the type of field I'm in, it's really important that we have like and it's similar for lots of other fields, but potential caveats or problems that I may run into and that I've already addressed it through, I have solutions. So For instance, right now I'm doing field work, collecting leopard seal samples, and I made a prediction of like, I will hopefully collect this amount of samples so I can address these questions. But, there's a chance I don't see that many leopard seals. I don't get that many samples out here. So I already had a solution for that. And I was able to address that within the methods as well. So I think that's also very helpful.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Any other tips before I'll ask the question that Daniela posted? Yeah, Muge.
Actually, I feel that the project proposal was good, but the budget, when I wrote the budget, I didn't write detail. Just I wrote that I will use for field work, and if I wrote maybe the detail about the how I will use that budget, it would be really helpful. And previously, I received Fulbright scholarship and DAAD scholarship from the German government and many other fellowship. And therefore, for me, the methodology is the easy one, but to write the budget was really important. And I really suggest any applicants to write the budget where how they will use it. That is very important.
Can I add something?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, in addition to my fellow applicants who have received the GWIS fellowship, I also want to give few more tips, like to tailor their application to highlight how actually research aligns with the values and objectives of GWS. And also to be more clear and concise, that is like to focus on exact research goals, significance, and major outcomes, completely avoiding jargon and explaining your work in an accessible way. So that's very important, I would say. And yes, of course, to emphasize, the third one would be to emphasize a broader impact, like to highlight how your work addresses global or societal challenges, especially those that align with GWS goals of advancing women in science. So that's where I was following, being a very new applicant last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's finish up. I know there's like so many questions we could ask. Let's finish up with the question in the chat, because I think it'll be answered quickly. So wondering if there's a preference for biology related fields, which we do have well represented here today, or if other fields such as informatics also have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say anybody from any field has a chance of being awarded this application. No preference is given to one field of research over another. We typically just have the largest number of applicants each year coming from biology related fields. Yeah, I feel like that's just like the strongest number of people who show up to submit applications for this fellowship specifically are just from biology, but no preference is given to biology over chem, physics, engineering, some med related fields or anything like that. So
yeah, that's helpful. You're also welcome to go view the list of previous winners, and you can see, and it may look as though there is overrepresentation of biology because we do get most of those. Many of our applicants are from biology related fields, but you will probably find other fields kind of within that list as well. Okay, I don't want to put us too far over. So Zoe, is there anything you would like to add here at the end?
I guess thank you for attending today. And if you do have more questions about this process or as they come up as you're, performing or doing the application, Aubrey did put the email into the chat, so nfp@gwis.org. Or is it fellowships@gwis.org? Oh my gosh.
it's both. Yeah,
it's
an
both.
alias. It goes to both. It goes the same inbox, so they're both fine. Yep.
Okay, so we do have our fellowships email available if you have direct questions, or using sort of that landing page for the fellowships on the GWIS website is a great resource. We have an FAQ page that we didn't get through today, but that has some really good information. And then as you're walking through the application checklist, we tried to be very exhaustive in giving some directive instructions there. So I'll hand it over to Aubrey for some closing thoughts too. But
yeah, no, I think that you covered everything. I thank you all for coming today. Thank you for being interested in applying to this fellowship. We absolutely love and enjoy working with this committee, everyone else who supports this from the national team and working with applicants and institutions. It's so great every single year, and truly this is kind of the highlight of like the Q4 meeting. Everyone is so excited to fund new applicants every single year. And obviously we wouldn't have a fellowship program without interest in applications coming to this fellowship program. So thank you for showing interest. We're excited to review and read all of your applications, and hopefully some folks on this call today are awarded in this upcoming cycle. I did see one more question come in really quick from Sujata. So like 30-second rundown. Preliminary data. We totally understand that, you know, some early career faculty members kind of branching off into a new space might not have much, or again, like first or second year graduate students just pending, you know, the status of their project may also not have as much preliminary data either. And so those things are taken into consideration from, again, the expert reviewer standpoint of like, it makes sense that a first year graduate student applying to this with only a couple months of, you know, research opportunity isn't going to have a massive set of preliminary data to provide in the application itself. So again, this is also very like applicant specific, project specific. If you don't have any, it's totally fine. Again, it's probably because that's how your project has worked out. And you can like, you know, elaborate that to the best of your ability within the application itself. And again, like I would then maybe recommend spending more time if you have less preliminary data, focusing on the methodology component of your application, as they will have likely the strongest interest in that section to know how you're actually going to carry out that work if you have less preliminary data to show at that point in time. So that's what I would probably say to that. But thank you again for everybody for coming today, and the individuals who are here who are past recipients. It's so great to see you all. Thank you for coming and taking your time to chat with potential applicants this year. We appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, I think it's so nice to have previous winners here. I'm going to send each of you a quick email and ask if it's okay if I share your email address with the people who were here today. It's fine if you say no. I'm just going to letting you know I'm going to ask that, so that if there are maybe some questions they might have for you, that maybe you would be willing to answer. Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. It's been wonderful. So nice to meet some of the winners. I just love hearing about research. We ideally would like to do more kind of featuring our previous winners in the future, and being able to actually hear a little bit about your research, you know, on like a virtual celebration. So we are hoping to do that for next year. It just would be really fun. So good luck, everybody. I'm going to send out a wrap-up email a little bit later. I've tried to take notes, and best of luck to you all. And yeah, just have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for organizing, Rachel. It was good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Yes,
bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.